Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Esports Weekly. I'm Ryan Bailey. I'll be your host as per usual. And just because it's a bye week for the SPL and SCL and SML doesn't mean that we get to rest here on the Esports Weekly crew. In fact, we've been hard at work to bring you a pretty sweet episode, I think, this week. We've got a bunch of exclusive video content for you this episode. We got a chance to sit down with Yannick and do a team fight breakdown with Sam for Soccer. I was kind of chilling in that one, so you get to see my casual attire as I get ready to bring you some of that. And then, of course, we've got a special edition cut of the most recent roll queue. I sat down with 4 of the best coaches in the SPL, and you get a little bit of insight as to what they actually do on a day-to-day basis and some funny stories that they have with their teams. All of that content is already up on YouTube, but we wanted to give you a special little look at it here on Esports Weekly just in case. Plus, top 5 plays. We've got every single caster's big power rankings here joining us today, and that's where we're going to start, is with the SPL power rankings, because even though we're only a couple weeks in here to Phase 2, this seems like a pretty good time to step back and assess the state of the league, so to speak. I talked a lot last week about it's a pretty binary system. Can you win a world championship? Yes or no, regardless of if you are in position to do so right now or not. If you're 7th in the standings, if you're still capable of getting hot and winning worlds, that is all that really matters. And so let's take a look at what I think the power rankings look like in the SPL right now. Renegades, undeniably the best team in the league right now. This, again, ignoring standings, this is who I think the best 10 teams are in order as of today. Renegades, SPLYCE, Rival, my top 3. I would have had a Rival on top of SPLYCE, but SPLYCE just bested them, so hard to argue otherwise. PK, I think, is number 4, though Dignitas has a little bit of room to wiggle there. It certainly has an argument to top 4. And then let's skip to the bottom. I said last week's a big test for Space Station Gaming. This was going to be a big setup against Obey Alliance, and frankly, they failed. I'll give you a quick preview, guys. Every single caster has SSG as their 10th team in the SPL right now. Crazy to think about. And that's why that whole conversation last week I think was so important on whether or not you can win a world championship right now. I've got SK in what, 7th place on the power rankings, but I still think that's a team that's capable of getting hot and going to worlds. You know, that's still on the table for that squad. LG has a lot of room to grow. I think they could potentially make a run at Worlds. Am I saying that they're a world championship favorite? Of course not. Are they even close to being able to win Worlds? No, they aren't right now. But we see potential there for that team. Obey and Space Station are the only 2 teams that I see right now that have a lot of work to do in the near future. Luckily, we're still pretty early here in Phase 2. I'm not the only one whose power rankings you're going to get a chance to see. Of course, we're going to have a lot of different talent on here today to go over their power rankings. But before we get into that, we have to recap what we saw last week. And that was a big test week for Space Station Gaming. They kicked us off on Thursday. And as I mentioned, Obey Alliance, maybe we should start framing it less as Space Station failed and more that Obey succeeded. It just makes me feel better because I'm putting more positivity into the world that way. LG did end up falling short to SK, though they did grab a game. Exact same situation against the Renegades on Friday. And then SPLYCE topples Rival 3-1, though that set was very close. Rival in control a lot of those games and ended up not being able to close it out in the end. That being said, they still hold the top seed overall at 10-2, only 2 regular season losses so far for Team Rival. Obey does jump up to number 8. LG still in the 10th slot as of right now, and E United slipped from 4 to 5 in the seeding after Renegades win over Luminosity that last week on Friday. Look, with Phase 1 standings carrying over to Phase 2, are the standings ever going to really reflect what I think the power rankings are? Probably not. The Renegades have learned a lot as a team since coming over and getting their first foray in the SPL after weeks and weeks of watching everybody else. Clearly they have made the most of that time, and I think that will they get to that top end? Will they ever get to first seed just because of their record? Probably not. Does it matter? No. All that matters is if they can auto-qualify to Worlds. Of course, more details will be coming out about that later on, but we can assume if they're in the top 3 to 4, even if they don't auto-qualify to Worlds, whatever that cutoff is, then they'll be A-okay. They want to get a good seed for those next level of qualifications. And that's why these standings, are they important? Should you be watching every single week to see what the teams are doing? Of course you should be. It's just like saying that winning your division doesn't matter in football or baseball. Of course it matters. But all that really matters at the end of the day, it's better to be a wild card than to miss out. It's better to need to qualify in that extra round in order to get into Worlds than worry about burning yourself out and making it to the top, top of the leaderboards during the regular season. Clearly, being the top going into a big LAN doesn't really matter too much. Just ask Rival. Anyways, it's time for us to go for our top plays of the week presented by Respawn, and these are the top 5 plays of Phase 2 thus far. And we've had a lot of really good ones. Number 5, Panda Cat. This was against SPLYCE last week. A cute little play in a siege that looks like it's just about over. Decides that he doesn't want it to be over. Jumps in, kills Ven in a quick Aegis. Saves his life against Cyclone Spin's damage. Panda Cat making plays in the mid lane. He's playing Hunters again. We love it. That's basically all you need to know. Number 4, FineOK a couple weeks ago stole a couple Gold Furies away from Team Dignitas. This was the first one. This was going to be really was a very close set. And FineOK ends up ripping away a couple objectives from them in this set. You'll see him come in from the bottom of your screen shortly. There he is. Y'all mind if I take this? Thank you very much. And I'm out of here. Knocks about Araxia on the way out. And then later on as well, FineOK in the middle of 3 once more ends up stealing this one away from the boys of Dignitas. Look, guys, Dig, don't feel too bad for them. They got a lot of objectives that were 50-50s in the first phase. They got theirs out of the way. This is just the natural order of things. This is the universe balancing itself once again through the plays of FineOK. They're at number 4. Number 3, Benji has played very well for E United. He's been a big part of their victories for sure. And this play in particular was one that set them up for great success. This set ultimately a loss against Luminosity, but certainly no losses for Benji in this team fight. This will ultimately become a delayed quadra kill. He killed 4, but timer, you know how it is. Can't end up getting all 4 for the quadra kill, or all 5, though Ionic just barely escaping. Benji King Arthur, I think, yeah, the lower third there. Seems about right. Still pretty darn good there for Benji out of the solo lane. Number 2 of the first phase, or the first few weeks of Phase 2, I should say, Adapting is going to clock in at number 2 as he clocks SK with a 4-man sonic boom right down Fire Giant Broad Street. This play was absurd in a close game between the PK and SK. This almost ended game 1. In fact, you're going to get another chance to see how this game actually ended later on in the show as we talk to Sam for Soccer and how SK was able to defend their base in this game. But they only needed to defend their base because Adapting was making plays like that. And number 1 in the first few weeks of Phase 2 was not an SPL play. It's actually coming from the Smite Minor League because Panatom, look, man, if you haven't been watching the Sangman guys, you've been missing out. But how about this? Multiple multi-kills. And we're not talking, I got a couple doubles here and there, I got a couple doubles in a triple. Maybe he even got 2 triples in a quadra. No. My man Panatom goes off for 2 quadra kills and a triple kill, all in the same game. If my memory serves me properly, he did not get set anymore after this one. I wonder why. It's tough to say. Panatom and the Sanguine boys have been looking great here in Season 6. Not at the top of the leaderboards right now. That belongs to Hype Unit, but certainly if Panatom's going to keep making plays like this, they're going to end up on top sooner rather than later. As I mentioned, 2 quadra kills there for Panatom, and he was not done. On the siege, into the base, going to get himself an extra multi-kill, a triple kill right there to close out the game. That's 11 kills that all packaged nicely together, delivered to the front doorstep, if you will, and 2-day shipping on top of that. That's a pretty good deal if I do say so myself. Awesome plays for the first few weeks of Phase 2, and I'm sure we're only going to get more and more, so make sure you stay tuned to future Esports Weeklies for even more action on the Respawn top 5 plays. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of cool video content here for you this week. We've also got a little bit more of a laid-back feel, so make sure you stay tuned and hear a little bit more about the SPL here on Esports Weekly. Hey, what's up, everybody? The next episode of Roll Q is going to be a special one. You guys were thinking next time it'll be supports or junglers. No. It's the coaches, the unseen 6th man behind these squads. And all these guys laid out some great examples and had some amazing stories about their times with their team. So make sure you tune in this upcoming weekend to the SMITEPro YouTube for the coaches edition of Roll Q. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. As I mentioned, we're taking a little bit of a laid-back approach. We're going to the casual set for the majority of the rest of this episode. And joining me here on the casual set, we've got Taco and Anatoly, two of our analysts here at Skillshot. Guys, I want to go over the state of the meta, because we've seen a couple weeks so far here after the midseason patch, which changed quite a bit, but it still left some of these remnants from Phase 1. The supports chasing after junglers, the ADCs being left alone, and frankly not playing a whole lot of ADCs. Let's start with kind of where you guys think the meta is right now and where it might ultimately go.
Well, I guess I'll take things, but it feels very flexible right now for a lot of these teams, and I think more specifically we're starting to get better insight as to which players have a little bit more of that multi-role potential and which ones don't, and in all honesty, the ones that do have a tendency to lean more in that multi-role direction have been having a lot more success.
Yeah, I've been tracking a lot of what players are picking these days, and outside of Snoopy picking Merlin 9 out of 13 games, everyone else is very flexible, so it's hard to really pinpoint what the meta is. I think that every role can play multiple classes as well. We're not only seeing the warriors in the solo lane, we're also seeing guardians from time to time.
Sure.
We're seeing the mages mostly in that long lane. I don't expect that to change anytime soon until somebody cracks the code.
Yeah, a lot of these teams are even putting their mid laners in the long lane. I mean, Dignitas did it with Heroine going over and then Ataraxia going mid. Do you think that's the strategy that more teams will adopt going forward, or do you think that's just for those teams?
Personally, that feels very team oriented and exclusive to those two teams as well. I don't think that it's a necessity to have your mid laner go into the duo lane, and in fact at times it might even be seen as a little bit of a detriment if the team that you're facing against doesn't, because there are a lot of positional changes that you have to factor in when you're making those types of swaps throughout lanes.
And there's a lot of ways to abuse that as well. When Zeros did do that against Arkell, he got heavily abused, I feel. And once teams start figuring that out a little bit more, I think we're going to see more jungle rotations in that duo lane. Not every jungler prefers to make that rotation. We know Lasper certainly does out of LG to lean on that long lane, but it doesn't really seem to work out for LG in the long term.
Yeah, it's only been Dignitas and PK who have done that so far, right? Moved their hunter into the mid lane. And I agree. I just feel like instead of learning a new god pool, right? Instead of teaching your hunter how to play Thoth and these other long-range mages, you're teaching them a whole new role. I don't know. I just don't know if that's the most efficient way to go about it.
There's pros and cons for both. I think like the most cons is like, oh, I'm not used to playing against actual physical hunters, and we saw that in the Zeros versus Arkell case. But I think the big pros is by having a hunter in that mid lane, you're having that pushing power, so you can definitely recognize the boxing potential where most of these mid mages might not be used to those early skirmishes.
And kind of piggybacking off of what Toly said, that's where we start to see a little bit more of that focus towards excuse me, the invade potential from a lot of these players. A lot of the contention around the mid Harpy, especially on that like left side hovering near the Gold Fury. We oftentimes seen teams looking to be a little bit more aggressive around those oracles now, and if you have your mid laner in the duo lane, I think the primary risk without a doubt is just them maybe being in kind of that false state of mind of thinking, okay, well, I'm in duo now, this farm is guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of those things that it takes time for players to adjust to, and maybe by the time the end of the season rolls around, Ataraxia will be very used to playing in mid, or maybe they'll switch it back. It's tough to say exactly what's happening there. The other part that I want to talk about is this support chasing the jungler around at level 1. I feel for all you junglers out there. This is tough, man. I mean, what are junglers supposed to do when they get chased at level 1?
I don't know, that set where I saw PK up against SK and Millsy chasing Sanford Soccer every which way, it just feels so bad as a jungler to see that enemy support not only steal the speed buff, but also to be able to abuse you to the point where you'll have to use an early health potion. Your back timing is going to get disrupted. You might not be in time for your next speed buff respawn.
I think the main shift that we're about to experience moving forward with Season 6 Phase 2 is that a lot of teams might just begin to experiment with not taking a Guardian anymore into the typical roles that you would expect, and maybe even trying to bring in that warrior presence that we kind of saw for a little bit, I think, at points throughout Season 5, but Smite is essentially a cycle. We have checks and balances for just about every single role. And, when it comes to assassins, they're kept in check, by the tanks and the warriors. And then the mages and ADCs, they're kind of kept in check by the assassins. So it all kind of comes full circle in a sense. And I think right now we're actually in a meta where you can afford to kind of just run 2 warriors and maybe some kind of hybrid jungler. And that would probably be able to deter a lot of that Guardian chase around, Benny Hill music kind of theme that we have going on right now.
Yeah, and that does happen a decent amount these days. I mean, where is that the direction you see this meta kind of going as well, Tolly? A move away from Guardians and support and maybe into the jungle, whereas more aggressive assassins or warriors start playing support?
It's possible, whether it's Aurora playing the Horus or the Hercules, or it's PBM playing the Circuits, even Weekend playing the
Terra.
Gebs, the Terras of the world, which makes sense. You have the most farm in that jungle role. So if you're going to run a warrior or an assassin, you want to limit the enemy's jungler farm while still making sure yours goes undisrupted.
Now, where do you, give me some picks, maybe not even necessarily for support, but gods that you think we might see a little bit more of down the line. I'm looking at potentially Chiron. He got some changes, that got some buffs recently. He might end up, I think, moving up and seeing a little bit more play. Who are some gods you expect to see more of in the second half of Phase 2?
Medusa, for sure. I think that Medusa has been a little bit of a sleeper pick so far. She has so much early game potential, and I don't even necessarily want to qualify her as a hunter that feels like she goes through any of that mid to late game fall off anymore. With the buff to her Viper shots, I think that she's extremely potent throughout the laning phase, and especially surrounding those buff invades that we see.
Surprised we haven't seen more Scotty, honestly, just a little bit, I believe, from E United, if I'm not mistaken. And then on top of that, also Naja supports, I think, will be risen in popularity. We've seen a little bit of the Circuits. Nemesis, I think, will be like a sleeper pick against all the Jean Quis recently, which seems to be consistently banned away, but sometimes still seem to slip that through.
Yeah, I mean, Nemesis is historically a great counter pick against that Jean Quis. I don't know, I just feel like assassins aren't getting as much farm as they used to, right? So maybe you go for characters that are a little bit more CC heavy, that rely a little bit less on damage, and try and leverage the fact that you don't get to 1v1 carries anymore, and you can kind of fill that setup role potentially.
I like the idea of a setup role, but I think with a lot of our teams right now, and more specifically the top of the league, would probably have a bit of an easier time at just looking to strong arm the jungle and really the entire map away if they just look for those heavy early game initiation type of compositions. And I think we see the most of that from Renegades.
Yeah, Renegades, and they've had a lot of success, so no real coincidence there potentially. Taco, Tolly, thank you very much for joining us and talking a little bit about the state of the meta. As I mentioned, I got a chance to sit down with Ionic. Make sure you stay tuned. We're going to get a chance to see that right on the other side of this break. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. Ionic and the rest of Luminosity have looked a lot better since the beginning of Phase 2. We had a lot of hype around this team coming in after their roster changes, and I was curious to see how different it was for Ionic from Obey to LG. Luckily, I got a chance to sit down with him earlier on in the week. Take a look. All right, welcome in, everybody. We've got Ionic support for Luminosity Gaming joining us here. Ionic, big changes for you as of late. You were on Trifecta, which is now Obey, but we'll call it Obey, I guess. And you decided to join this LG team. First of all, kind of talk us through what went on at the end of Phase 1 and how you ended up on LG here in Phase 2.
Well, Obey was actually looking to make a change. So I was actually without a team for about a week. And then, I'm already pretty good friends with Lasbra. So they talked to me, ended up picking me up. Ended up picking up Snoopy at the same time. So that ended up working out really well for us, I think, because I already had that synergy with Snoopy. Already had the synergy with Lasbra, so I'm really, really happy with where I ended up.
Yeah, I mean, instant results as well in comparison to the... I mean, you had some good games, I'd say, on Obey as a
Yeah,
team. You guys won a couple sets.
Good games.
Yeah, but not as much success. You've only, I mean, with this phase 2, so many people are talking about how much you guys have improved from that old LG roster. And a lot of it, I think, is centered around how well the two guys who were there for the longest, Joshi and Zalia, have played since you guys have joined. Have they done what you expected when you joined? Have they overperformed to what you thought they might do? How has that kind of dynamic worked?
Well, I already knew Josh was nuts, like from his performance in phase 1. I think what was really important is that they got a core that enabled them to do what they actually can do, which I don't think they were able. I mean, Josh had a couple moments in phase 1, but like we really, I think, enabled Josh to show what he can do. And Zale's been on top teams before, so he knows how to win and he knows how to play on a winning team. So I think with that stuff, like we're just able to provide a solid core that can help them show what they can do.
Yeah, I think that veteran experience is something that we probably don't talk about enough. I mean, between you, Snoopy, and Zalia, that's a lot of years of SPL experience. How do you think that's helped the guys who are a little bit younger to the scene, like Joshi and Lasbra, kind of adjust to this level?
I wouldn't really say it's an adjustment for them because everybody kind of plays for the most part like on the same level, but it's just all of us contributing our ideas together so that we can come out as one solid unit.
Are you as good as you expected to be at this point, or do you think you're a little bit ahead of schedule with a lot of room to grow? Like, are you surprised by the level of success you've had up until this point?
I honestly think that we have so much more room to grow. I don't think we were expecting to be like, super successful, but we were expecting to be competitive for sure at the start of the split, and this is just the beginning for us, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you start off by beating the number 4 seed at the time in E United. What kind of went into the prep for that set? Because you guys looked very prepared, and kind of break me down that set for me if you could.
Yeah, I think the E United set, I mean, we pretty much just prepped. I mean, Colossus has a pretty shallow god pool, I would say, so that was one of the things we targeted, as well as Big Man. And I think their shallow god pools ended up pretty much being their downfall. Like, we forced Colossus onto the Fafnir. Big Man pretty much only plays mages, so we had a lot of counters for that in mind, and that really helped us take the set, I think.
Since then, you guys did struggle a little bit more, losing to Dig, losing to SK, but the Dig set in particular, a lot of very close games there. I mean, is even a close loss like that against a top-end team encouraging in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a bit encouraging. I hate losing, so you can only take so much positivity from a loss, I guess you could say. But it's a lot of like footage, actual SPL footage, because scrims are very, very different from SPL.
Sure.
And for now, we're not going to make top 6. So all our games, as well as our games from before, are pretty much just practice for us to make it to Worlds and perform there.
So you guys have a big break right now. You had a really nuts start to the phase 2. Now you've got a couple weeks of downtime. What are some of the main things that you guys are trying to improve upon from what you've learned through the first few weeks?
Well, against Renegades especially, and also against SK, we kind of struggled. I mean, game 1, we actually had pretty good games against both those teams, but we kind of struggled transitioning from early to mid game. They're really, really playing a lot of pressure and pressuring us out. So we're just focusing on making sure we can make it to late game where we know we can shine.
All right, thanks again to Ionic for having a chance to sit down with me earlier on in the week. I mean, this Luminosity team is one that there's been a lot of hype around, but don't forget, they still have only won one set so far here in Phase 2, but they haven't gotten shut out quite yet. They've taken a game off of Renegades, off of SK, and off of Dignitas, a couple of their losses. As I mentioned there, they've got a couple weeks downtime, and I'm excited to see them again a little bit later on in September and see how that downtime has matured a young team that's still learning together. Stay tuned here on Esports Weekly. We'll be right back to go over the SCL and Smite Minor League running on the other side. Welcome back. Hey, what's up, everybody? Here on Esports Weekly. I just realized I switched earpieces and this earpiece doesn't work. But that's we live and we learn here on Esports Weekly. That's what we're here for. Like I said, it's time for the SCL and the Smite Minor League. And to do that, we've got John Finch and Anatoly joining us here on the casual set. Guys, it's been a pretty crazy start to both of these leagues so far. We'll start with the SCL, Finch. And let's start in PS4 EU because this was a region pretty heavily dominated by Out Cold at the very beginning of the year. And it's gotten a little bit closer since then.
Yeah, it has. And Out Cold, they were the representatives here at MSI, and I think they are the team a little bit more experienced. But like you said, it's starting to tighten up a little bit. Out Cold did have that loss to VGS Gods earlier on, so now they're a little bit closer, along with everyone else. Aerial Arise, I think, is right there next to them in the standings too. Both those teams at 2-2, and then Out Cold at 3-1. And Out Cold has started to improve. So if everyone else is getting kind of closer, I don't think that means Out Cold's struggling. I think that means that region's just starting to mature.
Yeah, I think that the level of play has gotten a lot better so far.
Oh, absolutely. Between Phase 1 and Phase 2, it's good to see the adaptations that these console teams are also making.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about that. As for PS4 NA, as you can see the standings right now for PS4 EU. As for the NA side of things, this was also a region dominated by one team, but really more heavily than any other region. This was all Nemesis in Phase 1.
Yeah.
And that has not been the case here so far in Phase 2.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Nemesis are still your top dogs here in this region, but if I'm correct, this is their first loss, of the season, that they took here in this second phase. Now, obviously, when they went to MSI, and they were facing, teams that were from their region, it was a little bit harder for them. But this team is still, for my money, far and away the best team here. But again, we are starting to see maybe some of these teams catching up a little bit. I believe it was the EBOG roster that they had that one drop to, so that team a little bit closer.
Yeah, I mean, eventually when you're playing against teams that are better and better than you, then you will catch up more or less eventually. It seems to have happened a little bit in PS4 NA so far. All right, let's move on to European Xbox, where this region continues to actually be dominated by one team. It's team rival. Dabo's Disciple still doing well at 3-1, but it's clearly Rivals' region to lose.
I think so too, and they actually have a match coming up really close after this bye week, which is going to be huge for this region because the one they did lose at the start of this phase, I believe they still had their subs in. They swapped again players at the beginning, so those players weren't eligible to play that first week. They both had to play with subs. So even though Rival did dominate that first phase, I still give Davos a little small asterisk that maybe they can pull this out in the next match. I think that could shape this whole region.
I mean, totally. This sort of, you've got Dobson and Fly, now we've got Dobson or Fly. It's been a crazy roller coaster in this region.
It definitely has been. There's definitely a little bit of bad blood you could tell between these two teams.
They want to beat Coast pretty bad, right? Yeah.
But it's still very early, right? It's only the end of week number 4. There's still going to be a total of 3 games where Davos and Rival will face off. They already played one of them, so 2 more to go.
2 more to go. We'll see how that one shakes out. It's really going to shape that whole region, no doubt about that. As for the NA side of Xbox, Hype Unit continues to be the team to beat. But the rest of the league, I don't know. I feel like there might be chances there, but then you remember that, Crimson's not on Blanche Fan Club anymore because he's on Hype Unit now.
Hey, you ever lost anyone as good as Griff, who's been on a staple on console for years, and then get to replace him with Crimson? Possibly the second or maybe even first best mid laner on a given day. You ever gotten to do that?
No, I haven't had to do that.
No, well, Hype Unit got to do it, and they're still really good as a result. So there you go. I mean,
that seems good.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts because, Crimson, I don't know how much experience he has in this role. So, I can't speak to it exactly, but it's not easy, I don't think, to make that kind of swap, to be coming in here for this team with such high expectations. To me, this is the furthest team away from the rest of its competition in any region. At all times, everyone is trying to catch up to Hype Unit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. How can you say anything but that?
Sure.
Even with this sort of role swap here for Crimson. And even then, you just put him mid on a Hunter.
Sure.
You put Baronic in the long lane on a Mage, and everything's fine, right? So who cares? This is the meta for them. No doubt about that. All right, Toli, let's talk a little bit about the Smite Minor League because NA has been a bit of a surprise so far.
Between Xbox, NA, now between also the minor league of the North America, Hype Unit continues to dominate. I think that when we look at this region, we got to look at Hype Unit to be a serious contender because before it was mostly Armada and Sanguine leading the charge, but now with Russian Poppy and Malis kind of leading the charge, I think that this is a team that you have to respect, beating out every single team thus far, although they haven't played against Armada yet. So I'm actually a little curious to see how that matchup's going to go.
Yeah.
But in terms of Armada, they were the top dogs, right? They got that upset up against Rival during MSI, a very important match to win. I think that gave them a lot of confidence, and I think that you can never count them out. As long as they can squeeze into that number 2 spot, we got to watch out for Armada.
Hype Unit Sanguine Armada is as strong a top 3 as you could ever ask for, I think. in a minor league. Cryptic and Exilium have been kind of punching bags thus far, but overall, I mean, those guys, I think any one of those three teams, we've seen what Armada can do against SPL level competition.
Yeah.
I really think that any of those three teams could really make noise against the SPL.
It's very possible, especially with Baskin now in that solo lane instead of solo or troll. If he's going to be playing the way we saw him play in phase 1, I think Armada can go beyond just an upset up against rival.
Real quick before we move on to EU, who do you think ends up at number 1 in the standings in NA SML at the end of the year?
I think Armada are still going to be able to dominate.
Yeah, I'll buy some Armada stock if someone's out there selling. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm actually a little bit surprised.
Really?
A little surprised no Sanguine.
Can I get someone to confirm where Baskin is?
He's playing for Armada
There we go.
in the minor league. Minor league Baskin, SPL Baskin.
Doesn't matter.
Two different,
they're different. Still good.
different animal, same beast, I believe
Yeah,
is the
that's
terminology
right.
for that one. All
a
right,
great reference.
EU minor league, let's move on to that. Team Queso is your top dog right now alongside Flashpoint and Simplicity. These teams all kind of locked up at that top slot, even in the same plus minus.
This is a rock, paper, scissors league, honestly, in the European minor league, where it was Queso beating out Flashpoint, Flashpoint beating Simplicity, Simplicity beating out Queso. I think it's just depending on the day where these teams stack up against each other.
Yeah, and Queso being this good to me is actually a pretty big surprise.
Yeah.
And they've done it by just playing whatever they feel like, it seems, at any given time. So maybe in the minor league there's more room for that. But I mean, the SPL is kind of similar, right? A lot of different stuff's being played. It feels like at all levels right now, if you just play what your team's best at, that gives you the best chance to win.
Completely agree with you. Basically, the moral of the story here is if you're not watching on Mondays and Tuesdays, you should be.
Yes,
Those
it's very
games are
close,
all-
and they're all very good and high level. You should watch.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you very much for joining us and talking about some of the extra leagues here that we have. Of course, we've got more to come here on Esports Weekly, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. If you haven't been checking out the SMITEPro YouTube, you've probably missed out on some awesome stuff going out right now, including a new series that we're calling Role Queue, where I sit down with a bunch of players from the same role and have them complain about how bad their role is and tell you what their pet peeves are of other people messing with themselves. But this one was a bit special. It's the coaches. We don't get a chance to talk to them very much at all, let alone as a group. So take a sneak peek at the coaches' Role Queue. Because there's a lot of mystery around coaches. All the time I get questions, what do coaches do? And I say it's usually a little bit different for each team. So that's where I want to start. Ro, we'll start with you. What would you describe as your day-to-day responsibility, or just what do you do the most for PK?
Babysitting most part, but no, I mean, I do a lot of drafting, a lot of VOD review, things like that, but it's all just like moderating and being like that third eye and like watching from an outside point of view, because a lot of their opinions of the game are obstructed because they're the players and they're the ones actually in the game. So I mean, you need that outside look and outside perspective to give them like an accurate idea of what's going on.
What percentage would you say is like playing, friend or therapist, and then how much do you think is actual in-game stuff?
It depends on the player. Every player takes criticism differently, so you have to be like more friendly with it, and then sometimes you got to be more harsh with other people so it actually gets through. But it depends on the player. I couldn't give you a number though. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Biggie, how about for you?
Yeah, I would say because Smite, I think, is still quite like in an infantile like stage of like just having team houses and stuff. I don't think most players see it as like they don't take it, I don't think, quite as seriously as they probably should yet still. So a lot of it is just, it depends on the team and the player, and some players are more open to coaching, some are not as open or at all almost. And so you just got to find a balance and what motivates people individually, and find your fit in the team, because I think if you went to any of us, I think our roles would be very different.
Yeah. I can
Right.
imagine.
Yeah, I think that's getting into that difference is what I'm excited to do today. Kabam, how about for you?
I'm basically just a mediator more than anything else. I have a lot of non-confrontational players on my team that like once like the person they have an issue with walks out the room, there's like all the issues they've ever had with that person come out. So it's like my job to like hear them and like address them. And then I'm basically like village idiot until like the night before games. And then like they're like, oh, what should we do for drafting? And then it's like figuring out like, oh, what do you guys like? It's like I have to listen to them like for like the whole time before that day. Like, oh, you like this and this and this. They're like, oh, that's right. Like,
I totally forgot.
Yeah.
I love playing a Willix. Like,
yeah,
I
it's
love
like
it.
you like these things, and then they're like, "Oh well." I'm like, "No, no, no. This is what we've done all week. Like, this is what you're doing."
Yeah. It's kind of the same for me. My team is like very opinionated and very like they're all really smart as well. So for me, a lot of it comes down to just being like a sixth opinion, to like trying to like sway things. Because if there's differing opinions, it's always helpful to have someone that's not biased, like Rose said, like with their role. So like having that sixth opinion as like from a top-down view from everything else can be really helpful. So that's a lot more of what I do when it comes to like in-game stuff. So then obviously strategy and that stuff too.
Yeah, of course. You know, just the casual strategy every now and then that of course is important. I want to think back to some of the crazier moments that you guys have had with your teams. Can you guys recall walking back into the booth after a particularly tough game? You know, what was one of the hardest moments you had to try and bounce your guys back from in the middle of a set? Obviously, post set, there's been a lot of ups and downs for all of you. But I think that the mid-set adjustments is the thing that a lot of people are very interested in.
Yeah.
Are there any that jump to mind for any of you? You know, where you walk in, you're like, the walk from the coach's room to the booth, you're like, boy, I'm gonna have to say some words.
Yeah. We had a really at MSI, the first loss to Renegades. We went into that tournament like way overconfident, got the exact comp we wanted, and then just lost with it as well due to our own mistakes. So everyone was like, I knew everyone was going to be super frustrated with themselves, and I knew they were going to want to switch up the game plan completely, which is what we did in the wrong direction. But yeah, that was one situation where we really needed to like adjust mid-set, and we didn't go well. But yeah, it's sometimes like those situations, it really comes down to like certain players as well, like of just like rallying the team together, which I think some coaches are really good at. Well, all coaches are really good at in this league anyway. But that's the only example I can think of, at least from this season, from this team, yeah.
Yeah. How about for any of you guys?
I obviously, we have our most recent game at MSI with Armada. After the first game, we kind of shut down because we obviously didn't expect to like get cheesed or like ran out as hard as we did. And obviously going in, I could tell because I can hear comms. All the coaches can hear comms during the game. That like morale was just like at an all-time low. So going in there, like my first hope was to just try and like bring everyone up as possible, which obviously didn't work in the long run. But that's like the only time this season where I can think like, wow, I need to like really step up here and like try and bring the team morale up. But yeah, other than that, I think we've been pretty good with that.
Did you go in with like a sick joke, like really get everyone laughing?
I feel like that would have been like a negative effect. I feel like Mike would have just been like, just shut up. Like,
You're telling me if you would have come in with a sick knock joke, Mike would have immediately really been back in the game?
Now that you think of it, that would have been a good idea, but
just saying,
maybe next time. It's in the notepad. It's in the notepad.
Yeah, that's a good call. If you want to see more of Roll Q, it is currently on the SMITEPro YouTube channel, and as well as the old one, which is the ADC Roll one. If you missed that one, highly recommend it. We had a bunch of the great hunters from all of SPL history in to talk about the history of their role. And then I just recorded today the jungler episode of Roll Q, so make sure you stay tuned at SMITEPro on Twitter, the SMITEPro YouTube channel. That'll be going up, I believe, this weekend, though. Stay tuned to that Twitter channel. Stay tuned as well here at Esports Weekly. Said that a lot this segment, because we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. As I teased at the top of the show, Sam for Soccer was also in studio this week, and we got a chance to sit down and go over some of his and SK Gaming's big plays, including their comeback victory over the Pittsburgh Knights in defending a base siege. If you don't know what to do as a jungler and when you should be where on these base sieges, I've got the perfect video for you. Sam for Soccer, breaking it down. All right, we've got jungler for SK Gaming, Sam for Soccer, joining us. Sam, thanks for taking some time out of your day to go over some good plays for SK Gaming as of late. You guys did have some tough sets. Pittsburgh Knights ended up being a lost set, but this game one that we want to go over did end up with a victory because of this Phoenix defense. So I want to ask you before we get into the play getting started about this different sort of setup that we see Pittsburgh Knights going for here. Most of the time it's just the jungler in mid, while the rest of the team is on a side Phoenix. In this instance, though, Deathwalker and Adapting are here in mid. What kind of changes when you see something different like that?
I mean, typically you want to at least match like the numbers of the people that they have, and then a lot of times I feel like we want to have at least clear in the lane, but in this matchup it doesn't really matter as much because they're both melee, so for them to actually get the Phoenix, they have to walk up in range. So
sure. So is it just as simple as you just kind of mirror where you know your opponents are doing? Like if their jungler's in mid, you usually go. What determines if you defend a mid push or if Scary does?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it may be matchup dependent. It depends if you think they can die or if like you can die. So you just want to make sure you're, I guess, trying to get the best matchup, yeah.
Sure, fair enough. All right, let's roll this clip and see exactly what we're talking about and what happens here on this attempted Phoenix siege by the Pittsburgh Knights. You and Belair called him Scary earlier, but you guys win this outright. Even with a rotation over, Emilzy gets a blink ult on just Neil. That's obviously not going to work. And then you guys ultimately chase out Emilzy, kill him, and win the game. So let's go back to the very beginning and kind of slow it down. And I want to just hear your thoughts on what your and Belair's communication is at this point and what's happening as they start to siege this Phoenix.
I guess our initial thoughts were we kind of just want to let him go in. Deathwalker went in first. I ended up using my 1 and my 2 on him, which was probably maybe bad in hindsight, but I ended up baiting Adapting in 2. Basically realized if they're both on melee, we can definitely kill. So yeah, I don't know about 2, but I can just ult them in, and then he gets kind of stuck there too. And that's to dash back towards our base, and I don't know, they definitely just went too aggressive, I think, after trying to go on me after using my 1 and 2, but I guess just capitalizing off of you.
Feels like this meta, I mean, so much of last year was about base defenses and learning how to break those bases. It can be a big struggle. You guys did very well last year on the defense. How has kind of defending your base changed from last year to this year? Is there anything different that you need to take into account?
I think enhanced fire giant's the big thing, right? It just makes it maybe a little bit easier to siege, but I don't know. It's still pretty similar as a whole. I guess Oni waves too, they can be a factor. But yeah, not that much changed, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, some teams really struggle, some teams do pretty well.
Yeah.
You didn't have to worry about breaking the base in this next play I want to go over, though, because that man baits the entirety of Luminosity. This is just last week where you guys were up against LG. It's 1-1. This is game 3 in this set. 38 minutes, Paul's dead, Joshy's dead, and LG's trying to do a Gold Fury. And I just want to see, let's go in right now, because I just want to see what your thoughts are when you see Zapman here, when you guys are all the way on this side of the map. Look at how far the rest of your boys are right now. What's kind of the thought process when you see Zap going in 1v2 again?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the thought process is just you hope it goes well, right? After you see like, we're all just running there to see how it goes, but after you see he gets the kill from Snoopy, it's kind of just like, oh, if he gets his ult off, this is going to be really well if they keep going, or if he doesn't get his ult off, it's probably just over there, you know?
Right. At worst, it's a 1v1.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were the comms like at that point? Like, what is Zap saying to you guys as he's going in by himself?
Well, I guess he was kind of focusing first on getting the kill on Snoopy, and then after that, he's like, I might be able to get my ult off. I'm not sure he's gonna try, right? Because he got Geb ult, and I think he didn't have beads for it because he beats the jump there.
Right.
So yeah, we were just going to run over and try to help him best as possible. But yeah, as soon as we get the ult off, we knew like if they committed on him after that, it should just be a really good fight.
I do want to watch it one more time because I got to give credit to the big tremors you were getting this fight. We watched us play a little bit earlier as preparation.
Yeah.
Look at your damage numbers in this fight. I mean, you're starting at 14K. You get up there pretty quickly. I just can't believe. I mean, it blows my mind that you guys are this far away and end up being able to actually come over and help on this fight at all.
Yeah. I think I think maybe we were going to try and do gold, and they were on it. So we kind of started heading over right away. But yeah, I guess he just ends up buying so much time.
Zap just kind of takes some Zapman pathing around the
Yeah.
back all by himself. You guys don't even have wards on the map. Like,
Yeah, we're,
just one of those classic plays,
Yeah.
huh? Here you come, first one in, immediately there to support the boy. You've been trying to save Zapman for a while by now. You're kind of used to this sort of setup. This huge ult between you and Neil. I mean, Neil's
Yeah.
Ganesh this set was really impactful.
yeah, for sure. Got a bunch of protection shred too for all my damage. I also had shard, and they're basically all frontline, so just hitting a lot of tremors and ults, but that might help it.
Kind of an easy 4K damage fight for you, you know?
Yeah, I guess so.
And even Paul shows up. Both he and Joshy were on the respawn there. You guys ultimately end up just walking it down after the deicide.
Yeah.
Easy for the SK boys. Sam, it's been a lot of fun trying to break down a lot of your team fights. I'll be honest with you. So many of your fights are over so quickly. Either you one-shot someone or
Yeah.
Paul one-shot someone, and it's just kind of like, well, that's the team fight. But glad you got a chance to sit down and talk with us, and we'll see you next time here on a Team Fight Breakdown.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for Sam to coming in studio and breaking down some of their team's plays. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do some more content like that in the future here for Esports Weekly. But stay tuned. We're going to go over our SPL power rankings right on the other side. Hey, what's up, everybody? The next episode of Roll Q is going to be a special one. You guys were thinking next time it'll be supports or junglers. No. It's the coaches, the unseen sixth man behind these squads. And all these guys laid out some great examples and had some amazing stories about their times with their team. So make sure you tune in this upcoming weekend to the SMITEPro YouTube for the coaches edition of Roll Q. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for us to break down what we think are the best teams in the SPL right now. You heard mine at the very top of the show. It's time for you to hear Taco and Anatoly as they've joined us back here on the set. Guys, let's start off, if we can, by looking at the top end right away, because it feels like the top six. That's where I'll make the cutoff, because that's where the MSI cutoff was. The top six all feel incredibly competitive.
Any of the top six could realistically be in the top three right now, and it's always really exciting whenever you do have a league that manages to get this close in competition, because it's just so hard to gauge what's actually going to happen in a lot of these sets.
It's about the people that set the meta, and I'm always looking at Rival, I'm looking at Renegades. Even though Rival did fall to SPLYCE ultimately, I still got to give them a lot of credit to beating Dignitas and beating out PK.
All right, well, let's see where you guys have everybody ranked right now. Again, this is not because of the standings. This is just where you think the teams are overall. And let's highlight some similarities first. You guys both have Renegades on top, Space Station on bottom. But we're here to talk about the top six. You've got E United number 6, and then Anatoly, you have Rival as the 5th best team in the SPL right now. What made them drop so low?
I'm not in love with Captain Twig kind of falling off a little bit in terms of going more utility style, going for the Odin in that jungle position and then playing in a very awkward way that's set up against SPLYCE. I know they're always trying to be creative, but I wasn't super impressed by it, and I was a little bit impressed by SPLYCE as they were able to overcome Rival.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Taco, you have as well SPLYCE pretty high up right now at number 2. Toli, you've got SPLYCE at number 4 as of late. The big difference, I think, between you guys is where Dignitas is and where Rival is. Taco, you've got Dig at number 4 right now. What is your kind of reasoning for why you've put them there?
So I'm pretty certain on Dignitas being in that like 4th place position right now, and the large reason behind it is I don't feel as though the team fully gives off that entire cohesiveness that we see with some of the other top teams in the league right now. And I think that for Dignitas, the secondary phase is actually going to be even more difficult, because I think in phase 1, they had a lot of set success around objective play, but we're middle of the season now and past that point even. So a lot of a lot of these teams just have a much better understanding of how to appropriately toggle this enhanced fire giant. There's also been a very heavy shift in terms of what we see in dual lane, mid lane. I think that Hurricane and Ataraxia are both solid players in their own rights, but at times it does seem as though Hurricane can really struggle trying to stay on the same page as Cubo and Trickstank.
Totally, you've got Dignitas at number 2 right now. Feel like they're still in a pretty good spot?
I do, because I think mechanically this team is probably the best team mechanically out there. Just sometimes they don't always seem to synergize cohesively the way that other teams do, such as Rivals, such as Renegades. I'm looking at those 2 teams specifically. But when Dignitas are on the top of their game, I feel like it's almost impossible to beat them. You have to really go deep in the playbook to find the victory there.
So this is your actual standings as of right now, and this is not our power rankings, but the literal standings. Renegades at number 4, but everybody that filled out one of these top 10s has Renegades at number 1. They feel pretty undisputed right now, just because of the way that they've really shaped the entire meta.
Their drafting, I think, is what's the most distinguishing between Renegades and every other team, because honestly, it looks like Renegades are just better at having good response picks into whatever it is their opposition is going for. If they're looking for that heavy AoE-based damage, then you'll see Renegades looking to either ban those picks away, or they'll look to take them themselves and kind of make their own adaptation of what the other team was trying to do, but better.
And even when teams are trying to figure out Renegades by banning out almost every single god Raffer is playing, he still gets the Terra and he still carries hard with it. So it's hard to really pinpoint where do you try to target against this team. Is it in picks and bans? Is it a specific lane that you want to start off? And the answer is, I don't think there is a weakness that they can easily be exploited.
Yeah, I think towards the beginning of the year, a lot of teams were trying to ban out Cherio, which has been a strategy that a lot of teams have tried to take against Cherio teams throughout the years, but his god pool has definitely expanded. Raffer trying to ban him out has been the kind of newest fad. That has not worked for any team yet. I agree. I really don't know where you attack this Renegades team. And SPLYCE feels pretty similar to me, where they have these sort of weird picks and they're hard to pick and ban against, and when they're playing at their best like they did against Rival, they look really, really strong.
And I think that's part of the reason why I had to list SPLYCE as that secondary member, because we've seen them fall against Renegades too many times for me to be able to say that, okay, SPLYCE is the number 1 team right now. That'd just be ridiculous. But
sure,
SPLYCE feels like the only other team right now in the league that is anywhere near as innovative as Renegades, and they're not a team that just tries to copy what everybody else plays. I think that some teams have success off of that, but it's too much of copycat, and then it just makes more room for SPLYCE and Renegades.
So if Renegades and SPLYCE are the 2 teams that are very hard to lock down and really hard to know exactly what they're going to do every game, are PK and Dig kind of the opposite of that right now?
I think it's about outplaying PK and Dig, because that's what they're going to try to do to you. I don't think that PK or Dig necessarily care what you pick, because they have their own comfort picks. They lean heavily on those picks. They'll even like lane swap from time to time, and it works out for them. But long term, I don't necessarily know if that's going to work.
I think it's just the fact that you can't afford to make an error against Dignitas or Pittsburgh Knights, because they will not only dismantle you for it, but they won't give you that room for recovery that sometimes you'll see in some of the middle of the pack teams, where yes, they punish or capitalize on a mistake from a team, but they're not able to maintain that same steady momentum or control of the pacing. But that is not the case at all with Dignitas or Pittsburgh Knights. If you slip up even a little bit, they're going to take the game from you.
Do you think that it should be viewed as a shortcoming right now for PK and Dig, or an opportunity for them to grow and become more unpredictable as the year goes on and maybe make better headroom than some of these other teams?
It's a little bit of a downfall right now. It's just because of the fact that if you're constantly trying to prey on the enemy team's mistakes, well, sometimes they don't make mistakes, and then we see them get into that team fighting aspect, and PK or Dignitas just don't have a good response because they were expecting something else to happen sooner.
Sure. Now, Rival is the other team that you guys had pretty far apart. Taco, you have Rival as the 3rd best team in the SPL right now. Totally, you have them clocking in at 5th, it looks like. Totally, what do you think is Rival's biggest problem right now? You highlighted Captain Twig earlier.
A little bit. I think that the SPLYCE set individually showed some of the weaknesses. Those games went by very quickly outside of that first game that went something like 40 minutes long. And Captain Twig, when he rotates and stuff like that, it's already towards a losing situation. I think in that set, they didn't have the most favorable matchups in the mid lane, and they started to fall behind. The Odin pick felt a little weird to me, and I'm expecting Rival to still be a dominant team, easily go distance, and I would rather see them go through adversity now up against Splyce than how they only lost in the first week of Phase 1 up against Dignitas, never to lose again up until Armada at LAN. That cannot happen again.
Just one of those teams that has that great ceiling. We know it's there, just have to consistently reach it for Team Rival. The last team I want to talk about in the top 6 here, E United has been sneaking in basically all of our power rankings at number 6. They were the 4th seed not too long ago, but after a loss to LG, I think a lot of people are kind of hopping off the E United train. It's
pretty simple, though, for E United. It's either step it up or get dropped, because I think with the level of competition that's being introduced now between Luminosity and even Obey kind of having that resurgence of life, I don't think that E United can really afford to kind of just try and stay hidden in that 4th, 5th, 6th slot. I think that it's only a matter of time before they get booted out.
The only reason why I even gave United 6, honestly, is because of the sheer talent on this team. Emelito on one side, Benji on the other, Ice Ice Baby in the jungle role. I'm looking at this team to really go far in phase number 2, and they need to be a little bit more, less predictable in their picks and bans. And we were listening to that interview earlier on of Yannick basically exploiting United's draft. I think that more teams are going to follow suit.
Yeah, something certainly to watch out for if you're United. If there's one team that you think is going to move the most, either move down the most or up the most out of these top 6 teams, who do you guys have?
LG, for sure, I think could very realistically work their way into the top 6 right now, and I would not be surprised to see them kind of switching places with United.
I could see SK actually crossing through that top 6 in the same exact way of United dropping.
Makes a lot of sense, guys. Thank you very much for joining us and talking about your top 6. In fact, some of those teams that are in the bottom 4 is who we're going to talk about right on the other side of this break with Finch and Tom. Welcome back to Esports Weekly. As I mentioned, it's time for us to go over the bottom 4 teams, though it doesn't feel like they're that far below the top 6 anymore. We've got Finch and Tom joining us here on the casual set. And guys, you just heard Taco and Toli talk about 2 different teams that have great opportunities to move up into that top 6, and that's LG and SK. Both those teams have looked good as of late.
That's also it, by the way. That's the list of teams that I think can move up from the bottom.
Well, yes, that is
true. Those 2 teams look great. I don't know. You
half
just
the bottom 4. You know what I mean?
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
that's not
worried.
bad.
You were kind of like making me feel like we're gonna move into a segment about who else. I'm like, no, that's it. Those were the ones. You agree?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Let's take a look at your power rankings right now.
Oh yeah,
where
because
you
I got
have
them
every-
right. So that's great news.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about the top 6 briefly, but let's focus on what we're here to talk about because we already went over a lot of the top 6. Though, Tom, you do have E United already outside the top 6 and SK at that spot.
Yep.
LG, then Obey, then Space Station Gaming. Is it really just those bottom 3? They feel awfully locked.
That's
to me.
it, bro.
I don't know, man. I think LG could swap up too. I definitely agree.
No, I just mean like of those 3, if they're going to be the bottom 3, that's the order.
Oh yes, LG can go no lower than 8th in my mind. Yes, I agree.
I mean, Obey didn't look bad against Space Station, right?
Obey is a perfect example of there's just not enough time in the evening, man. If this is how the team came in the springtime, I think we're having a completely different conversation here. I really like what Mineral's been able to do, but Mineral is absolutely like the quintessential call-up, man. He's making great plays, and as a coach, I'm sitting there going, awesome, but the 8 times you died for no reason is an issue. You got the right mentality, but you need more time in the gym, quite literally speaking here. Obey just doesn't have enough time. Like I said, earlier in the season, I'm thinking differently. I like what they've got. It's just not enough time.
Yeah, I mean, they looked good, but it's against Space Station,
Yes.
who now, by the way, as I look through all of our different power rankings, unanimous number 10.
I am very so I'm not a power rankings guy usually, and I was like, man, I'm gonna get cooked. Like, I'm putting Barracuda on the bottom. I'm sorry. Everybody's on the same page, so I feel a little, bit better.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, yeah, Space Station just. I mean, it's that time.
They look lost a little bit, right? Is the way that I would describe it. I mean, and that's what we thought Sino was going to do for this team. We were like, man, this looks like a team that's full of talented players that just don't seem to like be on the same page, and maybe Sino can be that voice, but it's just another, shout in the void, it feels like almost, right? I mean, I'm not quite sure what this team needs to do to turn it around. I'm sure if I did know, AJ would love to hear it, but I mean, I don't know what to tell him.
Yeah, it's tough days right now for the Space Station boys, no doubt about that. But on the other side, LG, despite being number 10 in the standings, by the way, don't forget that they are still number 10. They look like they might be poised to make a jump to 8, 7, maybe even 6 in the standings as the year goes on.
I've been really impressed with what LG's been able to do. There are still some pieces there that I think haven't quite locked, but in general, I mean, LG has shown me everything that I want to see out of a team that is trying to improve. They tried to make improvements, and they did make improvements without roster changes. Then they brought in roster changes, sweeping ones at that. Post roster change, maybe they still need some things to kind of click or make some adjustments, and we will see that continuing. But I mean, anytime you take Snoopy and add him to a major league team, it's tough to watch it get worse.
Sure.
I just don't think that happens.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you brought up Snoopy, because initially I thought there was just a ton of focus from other teams on Snoopy. He was dying so often in the games. I'm starting to wonder if there is a little bit of growing pains to it, if it's not even as much direct focus, or if maybe there is a little bit of struggles there for Snoopy in getting into that role. But how could you ask more from Joshy, man? He looks nuts, doesn't he, in that ADC role for this team, and I think that's a big reason why they're winning. Ionic has obviously had some struggles too, getting picked a lot, but he has a god pool that started to expand that I think looks good as well, not just the gap.
And if I can piggyback off what you said, absolutely, Joshy is killing it, and it's because of the room that's given to him by players like Snoopy and stuff. Snoopy's been the focus, and that's allowed the team to flourish.
No doubt, LG has looked leaps and bounds better, and hopefully the rest of the bottom four can kind of match that as the phase goes on. Guys, thank you very much.
We have SK in there, by the way, right?
Yeah, SK, yeah.
Can I just say real quick, that team's real good.
They're good.
Like, I want to make sure that's out there for the people. I mean, that's how
you
that's
got
how
United
tight
in the bottom.
I got SK top 6, baby. Also, just shout out to Vinny the admin, which was on my power rankings.
Okay. Shout out to Vinny the admin, I suppose. Guys, thank you very much for joining us. Again, this is the bye week, so no games Thursday or Friday, but let's take a look at the week 6 schedule. That's next week. So don't tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m. and expect SPL games. That's next Thursday. But we're going to come out of the bye week screaming hot with Dignitas versus Pittsburgh Knights. Then Obey gets a big test up against E United. That's a winnable game for Obey if Tom is where E United thinks they are. SPLYCE Dignitas is going to be a top matchup for sure. And then Obey PK will round up our week 6 matchup there for the SPL. Thanks so much for watching our bye-week edition here of Esports Weekly. As I mentioned, a lot of that YouTube content can be found on the SMITEPro YouTube. New role queue video with the jungler coming out this weekend. And as always, you can see all that information and more at SMITEPro on Twitter. You can get a hold of me at AGGRO on Twitter as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.